So please come back next week. The book is The Teachers, A Year Inside America's Most Vulnerable, Important Profession. And that will be reviewed by Michelle Caulfield, who is the Corning Painted Post superintendent. Should be great. And also important, that presentation will be followed by the Friends annual meeting. So we need to have a critical mass for voting on the budget or something. I don't know. Anyway, I want to thank the Book Sandwiched In Committee, Margot Brown, Lisa Derrickson, Dusty Hewitt, and Pam Sonnefeld. It's so wonderful to have this little group of avid readers who comes with great ideas, and then we sort of sift it all down to only 6. I am proud to say we put this year's program together in 2 meetings. Thank you also to Card Carrying Books and Gifts. They paid for the bookmarks. If you've been in the library and had the opportunity to pick one up, great. If not, stop by and get one. And they also gave each presenter a copy of the book that they were presenting. So we're really lucky in this little town to have a terrific library and a wonderful independent bookstore. It's kind of the best of all worlds. Today's book is, oh wait, there was one other. Oh, if you haven't, yeah, no, this came after, sorry. If you haven't renewed your Friends membership, is that a calendar basis, Hazel, or yeah? So you can do that in the back when we're done. And I guess I'd step outside my Book Sandwiched In role here and speak as a member of the board of trustees, sorry, of the library, to just say thank you so much to the Friends for all the generosity and I'm getting verklempt, everything you do for the library, and especially the matching gift that you gave for FLX Gives, where we raised not quite $10,000 this year. That was excellent. Okay, now today's book is The Making of Another Motion Picture Masterpiece by Tom Hanks. It's reviewed by Meghan O'Toole. Many of you will recognize Meghan from her tireless work supporting and presenting the arts and theater in our area. So rather than do the kind of standard bio stuff this year, I decided to borrow a couple of the questions from the New York Times Sunday Book Review by the Book thing that they do every week with a different author. So the first question was, what was your first library experience? Meghan said, in 5th grade in California, I had to do a report on missions. I remember being overwhelmed on where to start, and the reference librarian helped me make an outline and a plan. I've always utilized reference librarians from that point on in my schoolwork and career. Again and again in several different libraries, they've been an incredible asset and caring partner for all sorts of projects. I'm so grateful for their true service to the communities. And then the other is, describe your ideal reading experience. Rainy afternoon in my bed or comfy chair under a cozy blanket and my cat purring next to me, chocolate, and a page turner with a lot of descriptive language about gardens or landscape or town where the characters are living out their lives and I can dive into them with them. Thanks, Meghan, for joining us today.
Thank you. I'd forgotten those questions. That was a fun way to do that, though. Hello and Happy New Year. Thank you so much for having me here. And I was excited to learn about this program. So, and so neat to get to be a part of it at that same time. I am a lover of our community and the arts in our community, and I am a transplant from California, Hollywood, actually, which I don't know if Louise knew when she asked me. I think she knows me as a theater folk, which I proudly am. But I did move here, I think it is now 22 years ago, possibly 23, from Northern California, but I was born and marinated in Hollywood culture in actually John Wayne Land, Orange County. And I say John Wayne land because that's our favorite pastime sport in not only the movie biz, but just if you come from the LA area, is you got a name drop. So I thought I would start with that, in the sense that, you know, I was on the playground with John Wayne's grandchildren, and my sister was, you know, the tennis partner to his wife. And, you know, it just goes on and all the ways I could tell you I connect to John Wayne, because Orange County really was his spot. But just like when I moved here, and I did not, which by the way, the third day I lived here, I found Market Street and I went, oh my God, it's a set. It's absolutely like walking in the back lot, you know, at Paramount or whatever, which I was fortunate enough to get to do a lot of those things because of my father's job with the Los Angeles Times my whole life. So I did get a lot of inside peeks, besides having a lot of friends, and you can't help it in the industry. Just like here, there's no way to not touch glass. And both the sides of it, whether you're in maybe the science side and working for the corporation, or if you're, you know, an artist yourself or friends of a glassblower or what have you, or part of the museums. So movie making permeates and infiltrates everything in Orange County, especially when I was growing up in the 70s. And also at the time where Disneyland was expanding their reach, and through that whole culture, as well as it was all land of make-believe with the Knott family and Knott's Berry Farm. So it's kind of funny to me, and I bring it up because reading this book, like, I completely get it. Just like, oh yeah, you know, and you're driving down and you meet somebody and they deliver you coffee, and next 2 years later, there's a set dresser on some film. It does happen. But so that's just a little intro why I think it's kind of funny. I did not know about this book, and I was, you know, probably would not have read it, but I have a little insight to it, and maybe beyond, unless there's other folks. Anyone else from California? Anyone else been in the movies or any of those things? All right, well, I hope you find it fun, and to have that little bit of perspective as I do get into this book, which is something. I think, and I'll get into it, but I'd love to poll you. How many of you read it? Okay, and would you give it an up, this or that? An up, a side,
That's a
going
side.
back, a side, it's a side.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not a side, it is
It is a side.
it
right
is a side.
here.
Yeah, yeah, right.
So that's-
Well, it's so many books in the book. And there are definitely things that I'm up about. There was a lot I was flat about, maybe, and then some where I think he should stick to his day job. But I mean, he's got a great day job. He does. And I think he's a good writer, and probably in screenwriting and stuff. Novel, again, first attempt, would be interesting to see. You know, someone else, I think, and I don't know how many people always try to tell a story about making movies. I mean, he's not the first person, and it's a difficult task, I think. And if I was to tell you my favorite movie is Singing in the Rain, and it's a movie about making movies, and it's a movie about making movies at a time where the industry was changing. And so this is another homage. And I believe that Tom Hanks gives the Hollywood treatment to Hollywood in this book. So I guess I'll give some in what my thoughts are from the inside, in, you know, things he glazes over and things he does really well, if that's of interest in that. Should have brought the glasses, Meg. I'm trying to look where my first. Wanted to start with this. Here we go. I don't hate any films. Movies are too hard to make to warrant hatred, even when they are turkeys. If a movie is not great, I just wait it out in my seat. It will be over soon enough. Walking out of a movie is a sin. This is the writer in the book. So the book is, I think the hardest part for me is to give a synopsis of this book because it's sort of convoluted. Tom Hanks is definitely trying to let you know how a movie gets made. And a movie is made 3 times, as he goes over in the book. And he takes a lot of time in the prep and in the backstory. And I feel like as an actor, he's very much into what actors do, which is we create backstory. And so this book gets a little heavy in that, and maybe not as much in the conflict that creates plot lines compellingly, I suppose. So to try and give a synopsis of the very long titled book, Tom Hanks, The Making of Another Major Motion Picture Masterpiece. It starts with a writer who has had a famous filmmaker reach out to him, and think this is probably of the Spielberg or level of movie maker. You get that feeling. And he says, you write the way I think. And he wrote what I just read to you about movies and how one should respond to movies. And I think it's funny that he kind of basically, I mean, that's on page 4. So Tom kind of lets you know, I think about the book too. That's just, don't hate it. There's no reason to hate it. That's too much of a word. And what did it take away from you? So he starts with that. And then it goes into, which when I picked this book up, it has 3 comic books in it as you leaf through it. And I'm not a fan of comic books, and I'm not a fan of war books. And I was like, oh boy, this is going to be great, because this is a comic book, about military, World War II, flamethrower. And then you see in the middle of the book, oh my gosh, there's another full comic book. And then in the end, there's a 3rd comic book, or, portions of it. And it is clever, though, because if you know how movies are made, they're made in the format of comic books. It's called storyboarding. And often you start with the end, or you start with 3 points, like where the characters are at the end, where they are in the middle, and where it starts. And then you make little storyboards. There's an artist, some filmmakers do their own, who, plot out the whole movie in what are the little squares that is the comic book style, which Tom is so in love with movie making, he's doing that purposefully, I think. And that's a unique thing about it. But you do have a lot of time that you're learning about this young boy who's given a comic book. He likes to draw by his uncle, who mysteriously appears and who is back from the war and not doing well. And he takes his little nephew and buys him a soda and a comic book of his choice. And this is in a tiny town in Northern California, very adjacent to a place I did summer stock for tourists in a mining town, and it's 117 degrees in the summer during the day. And there's nothing around but tumbleweeds. So it's this tiny dusty town, and this little kid has this moment with his uncle where he gets this comic book, and it's about a flamethrower. And which, again, I don't read war books. I don't love war. So I actually was not familiar with flamethrowers even. And long story short, but not by Tom, this nephew, this little boy who gets the comic book about the flamethrower, the uncle leaves his life right after, like just disappears as he's sitting reading this comic book. And because he's a troubled soldier and or veteran. And fast forward, that same little boy is now an artist and works in underground comics in Berkeley, California, and gets a letter from the long lost uncle, and then thinks of him and writes an underground comic about a hero who is a flamethrower. And then somehow that comic book gets in the hands of this filmmaker that starts the book, and it becomes the sort of hero to adjacent to the comic book movie he is supposed to be writing, the blockbuster, like think Marvel, you know, the big blockbuster movies I don't go see. Comic book movies. But it is fun to see the little nuggets of how this helps. But I think Tom is trying to weave all these stories and the serendipity of, you know, think about how this comic book was inspired and then underground written, and then its life it takes from being found at a flea market several decades later and becomes a movie. And lo and behold, the movie is shot in the hometown, this dusty little place in Northern California that's perfect for movie making, because movies are not about those few people you see in front of the camera. They take more than a village. They take a pretty good sized city to make. It's a lot of people that make a movie. And when they descend on a space, they set up base camp, and they really, it's a massive production. And what this book does well, in my opinion, is let you in on what that looks like. And that movie making is really a lot of ordinary. It's a lot of everyday jobs and everyday people doing everyday things. And the best quote I will take from this book always is, if you're working in the movies, the goal is to solve more problems than you make. Pretty much a great credo for anybody, anything. But I will say that in a movie making, which he takes you through, it really is crucial because you're on a budget and there's time, and you have an entire world to create with so many complex moving parts, including the sun, which is one of the biggest factors, and how that all works out. And so if you are a random person who literally just delivered coffee by chance, and they really like that you got the coffee order right, you could find yourself working on a set, you know, a couple years later, because you found somebody oat milk in a desert where oat milk doesn't exist. And I really, that's not far-fetched. I have stories and friends who've gotten on and work in the industry through the craziest things. And I think that this book, if you're curious about that, give it the try and get through. I think there's 3 other books or another book in here. The first part where you're learning about this young boy who's an artist in this dusty California gold mining type town, or, you know, it used to be a, gosh, what was the factory? Light bulbs? Can't remember in here. I didn't write it down. But anyway, it's just really, that's an interesting and compelling story. It comes in later, but to me, the meat and potatoes of this, and the reason it should be read, is if you're curious about how movies are made. Anyone else who read that, was that part you enjoyed the most, or was most illuminating?
Idea, and the fact that each of those people had a little bit of their history
Yeah,
was really interesting, and so nice that he understood them as real people.
yes, because an actor tells their character's truth, and I appreciated that. And Tom was giving what we call backstory. And when you are just given words on a page, you need to maybe answer all the different questions of why this person makes the choices they make. So you need to find their truth and honor that, even if you disagree with it. And so it is beautiful that he wrote in that way of, you know, giving you all these little bits so that you see that they're everyday people. And then he puts them in this movie making world too. He really honors the crew and the everybody, which again was one of my things of the strengths. I would say when you get to page 253 and you're actually at go time and they're going to do principal photography, they're actually going to shoot the movie. That's super interesting, and he really lets you in if you've never been on a movie set, or even you know, TV set, what have you. Movies are particularly difficult because they're not on backlots these days, and even in backlots they're a lot. I think I had something I'd love to read about that. Anybody else disagree? They enjoyed another part of the book better, or comments on that?
I think one of the things I appreciated was, adults tend to sort of create a world that looks like it's organized and predictable and planned. And you knew what you're gonna do from the beginning to the end, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
That's certainly not how I experienced life. But I think he did a fabulous job of making that sort of chaos and serendipity sort of come together in a absolutely believable and magical. So,
Yeah, that is nonfiction in his sense of how he is writing it, if you've been around it. Yeah, and he lets you in on some of these insider stuff. I like the point that hopefully if you've read this, or if you choose to, you'll come away with learning that what it takes to make a film, and that movies are made 3 times. And that is something, if you live out there, it's a common thing you hear. So I'll read a little excerpt. Once back, Bill, that's the filmmaker, makes the movie all again. Prep is diplomacy. The shoot is war. Post meaning post-production, is the occupation. This is his wife speaking, by the way, or his partner speaking, by the way. He explained that to me long ago, back when I was curious as to how movies were made, which I am not anymore. I've seen the process. I can't say I'm enamored with movie making. I never wanted to be inside the glamour dome of show business. But Bill has shown me that the work has a nobility to it. That, like my love for science and teaching, she's a professor of science, curiosity fuels you and passion carries you along. Lose either one of those and you're done. The moment you react by rote or settle for good enough is when you're out of that line of work. I think he is great at admitting what he doesn't know, trusting that the picture will tell him what needs to be done, and that if he's lucky, he'll get away with it. He's a thief, and there is an honor among thieves. What kind of thief? A con man, a grifter, a carny. He calls movie making the cardboard carnival. The moment a customer buys a ticket, he provides them a distraction from life they crave at the cost of a few bucks. I skip a little bit. The first time he makes the movie is when he writes the screenplay. That is his imagination coming through that old typewriter, that first smudged up draft spotted with pencil scratches and Post-its. He says that's the movie he wants to make. And I love this passage because as an artist, I always know what my dream in my head is and what the consumer at the end actually gets. And I love the struggle of the artist. I have him around for prep and then lose him the moment he begins the movie for a second time. The shoot. The shoot is always hell. There is no limit to the amount of work the shoot requires. 1 million ants crawl all over his creation. I love that. Some of his grand dreams must be thrown away, some served from the body to be saved, some stored to age in either wine or vinegar. There's little he can control, not the weather, not the psyches of his hires other than Team Johnson, not the COVID protocols. The only decision that is his alone is to get out of bed or not. The shoot is the hardest, longest, most cruel of tasks. The shoot is the movie he was forced to make, resulting in 1 billion shards of glass that have to be assembled piece by piece into a mirror. That happens in post-production. The 3rd time that movie gets made, the movie he made. And he starts by stringing everything that he got in the can every day together. And you can spend 8 hours on a movie set, and that possibly creates, if you're lucky, 8 seconds of film. So if you like waiting, you might like making a movie. They are miraculous. I feel the same way about theater. How many of you, any of you have been in a theater production or in some form of it? Okay, so the Tuesday of Tech Week before you're going to open, I go home and I cry and say I don't want anyone to come and I can't believe we did this and everything else. And there you are on opening night, and this group, this village of people make absolute miracles happen. Things that were unfathomable on Tuesday become tremendous, and you need the audience. You guys have to be there or it doesn't actually happen. So you're part of the art. This magic happens. And I know that this too happens in a much longer, more convoluted, difficult, expensive process in making movies. And if you do, I do love film, and I'm worried about movies. I'm worried about movies like going to see them in theaters and them being a group cathartic experience, because I too do like my couch and being able to stop and go to the bathroom and things like that. But it's different when you're all there and you've all decided to be there for 2.5 hours together in the dark. And I might know you or might not know you, and I might not have the same life beliefs or what have you, but for that moment, we're all there. And it's a powerful art form, whether it's the theater or a movie, and whether it's about a superhero or it's something tremendous, like, Schindler's List, which changed people's whole experience because they were immersed in something they could never have truly brought fully into their imagination. So I think I see why Tom is writing his book, and he's committed to his art form, and he sees it in this. Another character in this book is streaming services, and this movie they're making is going to maybe have a week in the theater, but is going straight to streaming. And this is a whole new world for all this. And he is old Hollywood guard at this point. He's been around a long time. Tom has, and so he's seen the differences. And he grew up loving things like, Betty Davis films and Singing in the Rain and all of that. So he does have a life that's pivotal in this art form. And it's, to me, if you like Tom Hanks, it's his voice on this page. He writes absolutely the way he talks and is on there, especially in his early roles. He's energetic and kind of all over the place. And once I allowed myself into that and let him do his thing, and I especially appreciated it more when he got into the movie making process, it's a love letter to movie making and to how it's changing, and to let people know that it's not a frivolous thing. Even if it is making Spider-Man, a lot of people got paid, had their life, are artists or not. And a lot of cities where that movie was made had a lot of benefits. I've been talking about Corning making themselves sweet to movie makers. I mean, it's amazing we haven't had one here, but if your city doesn't let you do it, doesn't say, well, yeah, you got to close the street down at night, and where am I going to park? Because about 150 people are going to be here every day. Could swell up to 350 people, and we're going to have to feed them, and they're going to have to sleep somewhere, and they're going to have to go to the dentist for an emergency, and they're going to have to do all these things. And the towns that open themselves up to that experience, he really touches on that. And I like that because I think there's a lot of benefits, especially in towns with historical buildings, because they leave the buildings better than they found them. That's part of the contract. And so you can save buildings by wooing a film to your spot. But that's just all these different asides. So those are some of the strengths. Anybody else want to pipe in on some of that, or made you think of something?
Also appreciate really strong female characters.
Yes.
They really were sort of the backbone. Shapers in the industry.
Yes.
Really, he knew to align himself and to partner with them.
Mm-hmm.
We all know the Einstein type stories.
Yeah.
also men in the industry that he knew how to for people.
Yeah.
With the talent, and then, but then to really partner with these women and then these other, and then also seeing the women mentoring other women.
Yes. And giving that hand up and recognizing themselves. And I cherish the characters in that way, and how you also brought that up. He made them real people. And I mean, frankly, you don't see how much it has been not women as the director, but absolutely everybody's, PA and everybody's fixer. And then at least he was good in getting them to associate producer and so forth. Because most people, even myself, was like, what's a producer do? Well, everything, and it lines up, and it's a hierarchy of how you get your title and how you get billed. But I totally agree with that. And I do think he honored that. He also gave the Hollywood treatment to Hollywood, in the sense that he kind of glosses over that it is a lot of not nice people and not nice. I think it has changed somewhat, thank goodness, because we're not letting them get away with it, hopefully, as much anymore. And Tom Hanks is one of those who was a standout and a good sort in that. But he kind of there's an actor that is cast in the movie, and he's an absolute jerk, and he's the absolute stereotype of what you would think this, macho jerk, who's having, the world fawn over him is. And they exist. I've had to serve them in too many restaurants, or, have to deal with them in a retail situation, or just wait in line somewhere where they don't want to wait in line. And I joked I would do a lot more name dropping if we weren't being recorded. There are a lot of not nice people and people who are real full of themselves out there. But mostly, if you're living in California and Hollywood land, you're constantly rubbing shoulders with people who are making movies. You just don't understand that they're the PA who has just ran out and solved 10 problems that morning for Ron Howard. So I do love that he gave props, and that it was mostly women, because frankly, it is a lot of women who were only ones, and especially in the days that we don't hear about, were willing to do that work. And the men gave the other jobs to other men, but when they needed to get things done, which is what movies are about, they had these incredible, folks, and most of which were women who were willing to get it done.
Just as an aside.
Yeah.
The very, very long Barbara Streisand.
Yeah.
memoir.
Yeah.
But in an interview, I did hear a discussion that she did talk about the movie making, and she was writer, director.
Yeah. Yes, she was.
producer in some movies. So I'm kind of looking forward to skimming through some of that, so I get back to that part that I love so much.
I hear she actually she reads it. So that's one to do on an audio that I am definitely waiting. And I am team Babs, in the sense that, it's the classic example of a strong woman always being portrayed as, oh, she's so difficult. And she brings her own lighting people, even when it's a TV thing. I'm like, well, she's her own product, and lighting is everything. And she knows it. And she's a rarity, and all that chutzpah to get it done. And to be seen as something more than the starlet or what have you. And also her being a non-traditional starlet, as far as, her appearance and struggles she had to go through, when the fact is she's so phenomenally talented, so that is what I want to go.
Right, and this conversation, I would just say, go Greta Gerwig.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly. And such brilliance, and so many levels. And if you guys haven't watched Greta Gerwig's films, Barbie was the one that recently was there, and I do recommend going and seeing it, even if you're like, why would I ever go see it? It surprised me, even just all the levels she takes in it. And it utilizes filmmaking in in what it does best. You know, it wouldn't work necessarily in a book. And it's way more layered and complex. And even if there's things in it that you don't care for, it's still taking an audience somewhere that they just wouldn't have gone without this artist's taking us there.
Saying it's earning more money than any other.
Yes. Which is changing. Yeah. And got it into theaters.
Yep.
So all of these things are exciting for movie making and for that business and for women and for women artists and just the women behind it, getting it done. For weaknesses, and I think I touched on them again, I just think that there's a lot more ugliness in Hollywood, and he glazed over that. He put a lot of it into one character. And it's very Hollywoodized that you would so easily fire that character. That was like, I bet you that's like not happened in a very long time, without a lot of problems with your agents and your people and this, that, and the other. And I personally, if I'm going to talk about creating a great novel, so there's filmmaking, and he does know all about that. And I think he talks about that in a great way. But I think of stories like, he has a lot going on. He has, 3 or 4 different story components. And I don't feel personally that he weaves them as elegantly as a very talented novelist would. And that's where I say, when he's a nonfiction reader, which he is self-professed to be, if he'd read more novels where they intertwined these stories of characters, maybe every other chapter or every 4 chapters, you keep coming back to the one world and then they suddenly converge. Because this does suddenly converge, that they're making this movie in the same town where this comic, started and all that. And it's like, I think he was hoping to do, trying to think, all the light we cannot see. So, right, we read 2 different, if you've read that, 2 different people's lives, and then they converge. So every other chapter, is a different way. So it's a way to, I think, a little more compellingly tell this sort of, I think Tom thinks in epic movie format. And it's like open, it's this dusty town and big old tumbleweeds go by, and the long lost uncle who's having trouble coming home from the war, comes in on his motorcycle, and it's very movie like, but he takes a long verbose time to get there in certain things. Epic. It is, it's out of Africa, but it's just, a dusty town in California and a movie being made. But I feel like, yes, he takes it's 400 something pages. It doesn't, and if you were a novelist and not Tom Hanks, and you took this book to your editor, I believe they would be like, talk to me when it's 220 pages, maybe, right? Am I wrong? I don't even know much about it, but I think, and as a movie too, this would be slashed. It's a lot. So when I picked it up, I read it just to read it. And I was like, I'm not going to read it like I have to go review it or what have you. And I didn't even understand what this group was going to look like. I thought a circle of chairs and a few of us talking about it. So I really just wanted to read it like a reader. And then, because I love filmmaking, because I do like Tom Hanks, and I do feel his truth, which is his love of movie making. And I think his goal here, which is to let other people in, not just for silly anecdotes, but that hopefully you come away with respect for all that really happens. And he does, it's behind the curtain, which is great. So in that sense, I think it's great. But do I think it's on time and on budget? No, I don't think he made those marks in that sense. If I was going to go on for that. And I think you come away, I would hope that movies are magic, but they're made by common folks doing common jobs and tasks and solving more problems than they cause. And you know, I liked the book more knowing that I had to impart it, and getting into it is about something that I love and respect too, that I see that's in a space of struggle, but having these magical moments. I'm so glad that you brought up something like Greta Gerwig. That was the biggest thing this year, was how much money that movie made. And it wasn't a superhero blockbuster. It was a extremely feminist, creative, and that Mattel backed it. It has a lot of commentary. Yeah, yeah. It's so the movies are a phenomenal art form that can, yes, take you away and entertain you, you know, like Singing in the Rain, and I can sit and watch Gene Kelly for the rest of my days, but it also can change your life. When you sit there and, you know, something like Barbie, sitting there with my daughters, and, you know, there's a scene where there's a bus stop and there's a lady on a bus stop who is an everyday lady like us. And the gorgeous main character who is playing Barbie says, "You're beautiful." And the lady on, my girlfriends and I call her the bus stop bitch, because that's who we want to be. So the lady at the bus stop says, "I know," you know, and she is in her full, you know, whatever size she is, however old she is, no hair dye, no makeup, all, you know, no work done, anything. She's just a radiant human being. And which is what beauty is. So anyway, those type things can happen in a movie. And, you know, it was a pivotal moment, and it meant something different to me than it meant to my 20-year-old daughter. But it was so impactful, you know, on these different ways. But I could talk movies for days. Are there questions, or let's talk more about it?
So I would say, if you're on the fence after this about reading it, but you're curious, I would highly recommend the audiobook. You
Yeah.
don't get the comics, so although there's probably a PDF somewhere. But he reads it and is a wonderful narrator, and you can so I listened to it while I was getting ready for a catering job for 100 people. Kind of kept me going, and yet it wasn't, I think I might have had a hard time getting through it were I to sit down with a book. So, and it's available via Libby from the library, so.
I reserved it today, so anybody who gets on, you're behind me.
I think it would be fun to listen to him, because you absolutely hear him. He is on the page in the writing style. Yeah.
It's also interesting timing that there was the strike of the writers.
Yes. Yes.
You know, you saw those.
And IATSE.
Once in a while, you saw someone you might recognize,
Mhm.
because, you know, when they were like looking like real people. Not all, you know.
Yeah, no, yeah.
but, you know,
Themselves. Yeah.
just real human beings like every picket.
Yeah. Yeah. Fame is a problem of the profession. I mean, if your goal is fame, I think you either, if you're a good person, you learn real quick, oh, I got that wrong. Like, I'd love to be anonymous again. And I do have friends who are household names, and the fame part is horrible. You know, and everyone assumes you're making lots of money and assumes all these things, and it's just not that way. Yet, because you're famous, your kids can't go to regular old public school because the amount of scary mail you get about people who are obsessed with this person you played in the film. You know, it's a complex thing. Certainly, yes, they get paid a lot of money sometimes to do that, but losing your anonymity and the weirdness it is today of the internet, and like the stalking and the threats are very real.
But also the purpose of their strike.
Yeah.
It's like not everybody in the
Oh,
industry
right.
is making huge amounts of money, making fair amounts.
No, not in the least.
As to what they do.
Not in the least. Absolutely. And so the IATSE, so this was, you know, the crews, you know, they striked, and, you know, he talks about the Teamsters, and he gives one for the Teamsters, because the Teamsters are a huge part of movie making. It just wouldn't happen without them getting the trucks where they are. and making sure the set is safe and all of these different things. And there's several unions interacting on any given movie set. And now there's the ones battling AI who are in, you know, my own niece is in post-production. She's a visual editor working on huge comic book movies. And, you know, their contract's up next year. And there's so much to be said. The big movie stars had great agents and were smart business people who made sure they made money on the back end of filmmaking, not what they were paid to make the film. Okay, what you make money off of is the same thing the producers and the sponsors make money off of, which is the sales afterwards and the, you know, DVDs back when it was that, and it being replayed on and streamed, you get these residuals and you get all this money from that. Most actors, including friends I have, who are the name, are the reason you see this whole movie franchise. They're doing movies now and getting paid scale, which scale I would tell you is maybe $10,000 to do this movie. And this is a person who has stalkers at a level that you can't just, again, send your kids to regular school or just go different things. You do need to think about security. Like, these are costs we don't think about, you know? So it's just an interesting thing that you're bringing up. Yes, the strike, and yes, seeing regular people. There's so many different, I like that he brings in the security aspect in this book on the main female character, but that happens to other people too. You know, who, again, it seems like she's, actually, I just watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Have you guys seen that? Another about movie making.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Also, I'm reading this, not knowing flamethrowers. The end of the movie is a flamethrower. I'm like, well, there's that weird synchronicity that happens. Yeah. So, movie making is all these different aspects and so forth. And my tangent of why I brought up Once Upon a Time in America, but it made the point that he was trying to make in a better way, and I can't think of it now. So I apologize for my I'm just as ADHD as Tom Hanks. So other questions? Or
How does the industry feel about this book?
you know, I did look up and I saw, you know, I mean, he's kind of a golden child, so people are going to be positive. I did see reviews that were same sort of, you know, feeling of like, boy, it took a long time. So I would say I didn't look at his sales. I don't know if it's on any lists or anything like that. I don't think it made that, but I never even heard about it. And this was released early last year, right? So, but I would think his colleagues are probably like, oh, and they also get to read it knowing he's talking about Elvis's makeup artist when he's telling this story, you know, like they get to connect the dots of who some of this lore is about. Yeah. So I think in that way, but I don't really know. It's a good question.
Supportive but not raving.
Yeah. Yeah. Again,
Yeah.
because they'd like to make a movie with him. And they'd like to play somebody in here if it is, or they just love to be his gaffer or his cinematographer or one of his many gaffers.
Does he indicate whether he regards it as worse than his best film?
So it's all fictional in here. So it's not Tom Hanks. He's writing about other characters and so forth. So it is not a memoir. You're not learning about Tom Hanks himself, which has he written?
No.
Yeah.
He was interviewed on TV.
Was that like CBS Sunday Morning or something? I saw it. I did see that.
It was MSNBC.
Oh, MSNBC. Okay, I didn't see that one.
And he did talk about movies and, you know, which ones he liked and things like that. And they were not the real big ones that you.
Oh, yeah.
Think.
Well,
And he did come across as an extremely nice person.
Yes, nice. And again, I mean, he solves problems, right? He listens to the director. He had an anecdote that I saw about making Splash, and he's coming off Bosom Buddies, which is how all of us were pretty much introduced to him. And so he's, you know, he's a Donald O'Connor. He's a, you know, hat and cane kind of guy, comedian. And he's in this movie, and he thinks he needs to be as funny as like you know, the comedians in the movie, who was it, John Candy and Levy. Yes, Eugene Levy. So anyways, but Ron Howard says to him, your job is to love the girl, not to be funnier than these guys. Their job is to be funny to make this movie. And your job is to love the girl so that we all love the girl. And I thought it was a great anecdote about that was a big thing for him. That was like his moment of understanding and taking him from goofy guy, comedian, side character type thing to being what we now know as, you know, a favored and favorite leading man. Yeah.
I have a question for you, Louise. How did your committee choose this book?
I recommended it.
Okay, but, well,
You'll probably see if you look at the list every year, there are some very serious ones. And also then we throw some things into lighten it up a little bit, so that was partly.
So there's fiction, there's not going to.
Yeah, we turned the memoirs,
You know,
50-50.
Not a lot of attention, so I was curious to know how it came to your awareness. Thank you.
It was a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah.
It was, okay.
Yeah.
And his name does that.
ER's best books of the year, so.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was not there more.
I didn't see that.
They were expressed.
A while ago.
Right.
Yeah, it was years last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But it is an interesting insight into the movies, and one I hope you come away with respect for in that sense. He does his job. Any other great insights, things you loved?
I didn't read this book because that's one of the reasons I came today was because I wasn't sure if I wanted to or that kind of thing, but I had heard him on. When the press came out earlier this year and talked, you know, he collects all these typewriters.
Yes.
This massive collection.
Yes.
And I always craves, you know, like moving to the next step from the typewriter to the
Mhm.
book. But I was curious whether or not it was written during COVID. Or not, because a lot of COVID books don't seem to have, that people have written, don't seem to have editors that gave them good
Ooh.
input. And I don't know, I feel that way about some of the ones that could have been cut, could have been edited, and they also, people were in a very different place in their heads and how they spent their time, and you know, they had endless amount of time to write it, and it seems like he just really needed somebody to help him
Mhm.
edit it.
Mhm.
Because to me, is the chart, don't you think?
Oh, I do think, and I think he had pretty big name editors and people he thanks, but I do think he also walks on water, you know? I mean, he's a fortunate position.
If it wasn't Tom Hanks, would you? enjoy this
Absolutely.
Or not?
I would have enjoyed the part of the movie making.
Okay. Would you have read it if Tom Hanks wasn't the writer? Would you?
Well,
have
she
read this
wouldn't
book
have-
if it-
I wouldn't have read it if she had.
I was curious because.
I think that, no, absolutely. Well, and this is how, right, well, and this, I mean, movies get made because you're Ron Howard or because you're Tom Hanks or, you know, hopefully now because you're Greta Gerwig. So I do think he was given license. That's where I'm saying his day job, he really is good at what he does.
Yeah.
But as if he was somebody sending this to a publisher, I think they would teach him a few things personally. So.
But you did a good job of reviewing it. So.
Oh, well, thank you. It was fun. This is a fun thing and I love the library and thank you for doing this and all the other great things you do in our community. So it's great. Thanks.